An escaped slave who eventually became a lawmaker will become the first individual African American honored with his own statue at the South Carolina State House. This is the story of a man by the name of Robert Smalls, who was born into slavery and went on a Jack Sparrow esque escapade that led to him and his family's freedom, where he managed to commandeer and steal a Confederate ship and sail it to the Union blockade, evading capture, evading raising any alarm, and would eventually go on to become a naval captain in the U.S. Navy.
Yeah. So this man here, his name is Robert Smalls, and he is going to be the first African American to be honored with a statue at the South Carolina state capitol. He is all the other statues are of white men, and most of them have ties to the Jim Crow era. So this is a very big progressive step forward for South Carolina, especially in the modern context of what's going on in the country right now, where a lot of racially charged and anti-black statues are being put back up. Smalls definitely is a man who deserves to be put up and probably to be put up first because he begins his career of greatness by literally commandeering a Confederate vessel and stealing it to get to freedom. He just up and takes it. So he hurts the war effort to keep his people enslaved while also getting his freedom.
Hey, I see absolutely nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that.
it's a very big move, and when he does get his vessel to the Union lines, the Union Navy kind of recognizes that this is a man of talent, and he will be commissioned in the United States Navy as an officer and as a leading officer too, which is a big deal because during the Civil War, a person of color was really capped at the rank of sergeant. They almost never saw actual commanding roles, and Smalls was one of the few people to break through that barrier.
Well, when you look at his great escape that he undertook, you'll start to understand why. Because on May 13th of 1862, just a year after the war had started, Robert Smalls was working as a laborer on a Confederate steamer in Charleston Harbor when he set into plan a daring motion where he noticed that the Confederate crew would leave every night and not return until the morning. And during this time, Small, as well as six other slaves and their families, would go onto the ship and hijack it in the middle of the night, evading capture, evading raising any suspicions before they reached the Union blockade. And what he did was he basically wore a a top hat as well as a Confederate officer uniform.
Yep. Yeah, he's basically wearing a giant gray overcoat and a top hat and just sailing the boat like he is absolutely supposed to be doing this. And all the lookouts, all the fortresses, all of this incredibly tense, highly volatile military defenses at this harbor just let him pass because Charleston is staring down Fort Sumter and Fort Sumter is staring down Charleston, and both of them are daring the other to move.
Well, at this point, Fort Sumter had already been attacked and taken over by the Confederacy.
Mm.
That's why the Union had a blockade. So the fact that they managed to sail past this defensive fortification is incredible. And that wasn't his most impressive feat, in my opinion, because not only did he gain his freedom and fought for the Union, but immediately after the war ended, he became one of more than a dozen African Americans to serve in Congress during the Reconstruction when he was elected to the House of Representatives after moving back to South Carolina and starting his life, his family. And it's a story of really big hope, and he really goes to show just how important it was. And there's actually a lithograph showing him, as well as seven men in total, the first African Americans in Congress, and a picture showing their achievement. So for him to have started to be recognized here is an incredible story where his statue will be on display again in a period of time when a lot of Confederate statues are being put back up.
Yep. Yep. He is you know, he is the first black man to be put at this state house. He hopefully won't be the last. Um, he, you know, basically came back from the war and said, I was so good at getting the people over there in Washington to listen to me that they made me an officer, which almost never happened. And that was a pretty good what's the word? Rally line to get into Congress. And that's exactly what he did. And this man basically dedicated his life to making this country better for the people who were living in it, particularly those like him who were being forced to start out at the worst possible lot in life.
Well, and that's where his statue is really a great symbol because the artist, a Jamaican man by the name of, I believe it's Basil Watson, who was Jamaican born but lives outside of Atlanta, is designing the statue. And one of the design elements he chose was to have Smalls standing on a stack of books to symbolize his rise from being someone who was born illiterate to learning how to read, eventually becoming a pioneering statesman and showing just how much he can elevate. And the statue is going to be 12 feet tall.
Yep. Yeah, I love how you can even see in the little clay model he's got that he's basing his that he's done as like the sort of proof of concept for his statue. Smalls does not have time for your bullshit. Like he is a serious man and he is going to do his job, so help him God.
Well, that's got to be such a daunting task to try and pass meaningful legislation while almost every other person you're in office with is actively trying to get you out and to prevent you from voting.
Yeah.
And what I think is really cool about this story too is Watson highlights that he wants to fade into the background. He wants the statue to be a remembrance to Robert Smalls, who did the unfathomable for a former slave and to show just how much you can rise and progress. And he basically said, I want to be forgotten. I don't want to be remembered. Like, this is not about me. This is about a greater man, a greater picture.
Yeah, yeah, he's taking it on himself what he sees as his civic duty to fade away. There's a very common saying of no matter how abstract the painting, the signature is always realistic, and the artist here doesn't want his signature on it at all. He doesn't want to be the important part. He doesn't want this to be remembered as, oh look, that's a Picasso. No, he wants to be remembered as, oh look, that's Congressman Smalls.
But we figured that this would be a great piece to talk about because you don't hear stories like this all too frequently, which is sad. But it's honoring a man who quite literally went through hell on numerous fronts and still came out a better man. And you have to respect the journey he'd been on. But I think that's probably a good point to wrap this up. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know your thoughts down below, and we will see you in the next episode.